IQAC Lakhimpur Girls College welcome each and every individual participant to the webinar lecture on the relevance of the humanities in the age of science. Good morning, one and all present in this webinar lecture series with Mr. Aloy Buragohain. I remember Mahatma Gandhi said once, he mentioned about the 7 social evil, and one of the social evil he mentioned is none other than science without humanities. And today we are going to have a very beneficial and a fruitful talk, lecture from Mr. Aloy Buragohain. Without any further delay, let me introduce our resource person for today, after which I'll give time to Dr. Surajit Bhuya, our principal of Lakhimpur Girls College, to inaugurate the program, after which our resource person will take his time. Aloy Buragohain is a graduate of IIT Madras and an alumnus of the Assam Valley School, Balipara, and St. Mary's School, North Lakhimpur. At IIT Madras, he was the founding president of the IIT Madras Student Association for the Development of India's Northeastern region. In short, SEDINER, a first of its kind initiative among IITs. In 2017, Aloy was appointed as research fellow of an European Research Council project at Darmstadt University of Technology, Germany. While in Germany, Aloy was also elected as the president of the Darmstadt Indian Association. As a researcher, Aloy has presented scientific papers at some of the most prestigious conferences across the world, including the University of Cambridge in England, Jean Monnet University in France, and TU Darmstadt, Germany, and Indian Institute of Science, Bangalore. He has also conducted archival research at multiple institutions, including the University of Oxford in England, British Library at London, and University of London, and British Museum, and the National Archives of the United Kingdom, and so on. In 2013, at the age of 19, Aloy represented India at the United Nations headquarters in New York City, USA, at the New York Global Young Leaders Summit. Apart from this, he has participated and won awards at multiple national and international events. I hope and believe that we will have a blessed time, a happy time, and a very beneficial session with him today. And I welcome our resource person, Mr. Aloy Buragohain, today to this program. Now, I would like to welcome our principal, Dr. Surajit Bhuya sir, to do the formal inauguration of this program. Over to you, sir.
Am I audible?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Thank you, Baby Santera. And good morning to all of you. First of all, I would like to welcome all participants to this webinar organized by IQAC of Lakhimpur Girls College. This is lecture number 15 of this webinar series organized by this college. And I am delighted to announce today we have with us Aloy Buragohain, former research fellow, European Research Council project, Darmstadt University of Technology. And he will deliver a talk on the relevance of the humanities in an age of science. I thank Aloy for giving his valuable time with us, and I think the participants will be benefited and it will be an interesting talk. And I IQAC of this college for organizing this webinar. And with these few lines, I will
Thank you so much, sir, for your kind words. Now, without any further delay, we will move on. And then for if any of the things that you need to know from us, then you can text privately, you can chat privately to those co-hosts and hosts. There are quite a lot of co-hosts and hosts. You can ask them, you can inquire from them, and then you can send your questionnaires, you can send your queries and drop it in the chat box below. Now, with this few words, I would like to invite Mr. Aloy Buragohain to take up his time. Please.
Aloy, you have to unmute yourself. Aloy.
Kindly unmute it.
Yeah, so thank you very much for that wonderful introduction. I'm truly humbled by this overwhelming response from your end. Am I audible?
Yes, you're. Yeah.
Great. And also sorry for the technical problems that we had, but I think it's sorted out now and we can begin. So first of all, just to give you a bit of my background, and I think my background in a way connects directly with the topic, the theme of today's talk. So I am a native of North Lakhimpur, Assam, and over the last almost 2 decades, I have gone through multiple experiences in different parts of the country, in different parts of Assam, and in different parts of the world. And somehow the idea of the relationship between the humanities and the sciences, or the arts and the so-called natural sciences, has caught my attention, has managed to make me really curious. And it was right since my school days at St. Mary's here in Lakhimpur that I encountered certain incidents, certain events, and that got me thinking about the true relationship that exists between these two apparently different and distinct disciplines. So when I was small, I think it was in class 4 or class 5, we had a chapter on light. It was the first ever introduction to the concept of light in science. And the teacher had just introduced us to the speed of light, and it was 3 into 10 to the power, many times meter per second. And that kind of got me curious, and I asked the teacher, I won't name him, but he was a very good teacher, and I asked him, sir, if light can travel so far in such a short duration of time, then if I turn on my torch from here, it should reach the moon, or it should reach New York City or London, isn't it? It was a very curious and innocent kind of query from my end. But the reply which came kind of disappointed me, because first of all the kids around me, all my classmates, they burst into laughter. And all of them laughed, and they might have thought that this is a very stupid kind of question. And the teacher also, in a way, gave a brief laughter, and then he said, but there is something called intensity of light. The intensity of the light of your torch is not powerful enough to reach New York. Now, the problem I encountered was I was not familiar with the concept of intensity. And knowing the fact that because we were just in class 4 or 5, I think the teacher should have taken the time out to at least give me a brief introduction to the concept of intensity. But he stopped there, and that was it. And that, until I again reached class 9 or 10, when I again encountered the concept of intensity, I always had this doubt what it was. But this episode that happened between me and my teacher, that exposes or highlights a larger problem or larger kind of situation that exists in our society, and that is the unwillingness or the reticence of the so-called scientists from accepting in all their humility, in modesty, what they do not know, or what we do not know. And everyone tries to just give an explanation or explain things away as if it is very simple, but science is not so simple, nothing is. And especially when it comes to a child, of who is just 11 or 12 years old, or maybe just 9, I think teachers should take their time out to explain the difference and the various concepts in detail. Now, I think that because of such lack of clarity of such basic concepts like intensity, what is speed of light, what is light itself, a lot of children do not really get to know what science is. And in the long run, we start confusing science with just a discipline. In like Ohomiyat kobole gole, Ohomiyat amar বহুত মানুহে আমি কমনলি শুনিবলৈ পাওঁ বিশেষকৈ মেট্ৰিকৰ যেতিয়া ৰিজাল্ট দিয়ে তেতিয়া যে এইটো সায়েন্সৰ ল'ৰা বা এইজনী সায়েন্সৰ ছোৱালী বা ই আৰ্টছৰ ল'ৰাহে হয় বা ই কমাৰ্চ ল'ব লাগে কাৰো কনসেপশন ক্লিয়াৰ নহয় যে আসলে সায়েন্স এটা বাস সাবজেক্ট নে সায়েন্স ইজ এ ষ্টেট অফ মাইন্ড কিন্তু আজি মই ক'ব বিচাৰো মোৰ এই গোটেই থিমটো মই এটোৱে ক'ব বিচাৰিম যে সায়েন্টিফিক ৱে ইজ এ ষ্টেট অফ মাইন্ড ইটস এ ৱে অফ থিংকিং ইটস নট simply a discipline or an institution আৰু আমি যেতিয়ালৈকে সায়েন্সক জাস্ট এটা সাবজেক্ট বনাই থৈ দিম আৰু হিউম্যানিটিজ আৰ্টস বা কমাৰ্চৰ লগত কমপ্লিটলি আমি সেপাৰেশন এটা ইমাজিন করি তেতিয়ালৈকে আমি কেতিয়াও আমাৰ সমাজক বা আমাৰ এই পৃথিৱীখনক এই জগতখনক আমি কেতিয়াও ভালদৰে বুজিব নোৱাৰো কাৰণ কিবা এটা বুজিবলৈ সত্য কি হয় হেতু জানিবলৈ আমি not only science কিন্তু আৰ্টস কমাৰ্চ সব মিলিহে এটা কমপ্লিট পিকচাৰ আমাক আমি জানিবলৈ পাম আৰু সেই কাৰণে আজি মই প্ৰেজেন্টেশনটো তাৰ নেক্সট স্লাইডলৈ যাব বিচাৰো and can you have the next slide please Can you have the next? Yeah. So yeah, as you can see, all of interesting lagibo. Efale whole Aishwarya Rai mi sobe janu L'Oreal hair color tar advertisement dise aru efale e manujon কোন আপোনালোকক খুদিলে আপুনি কব পাৰিবনে আপোনালোকে chat boxত লিখি দিব পাৰে কোন হ'ব পাৰে Okay, কিছুমানে correctly লিখিলে এখেত হল Socrates. So Socrates is known as the father of Western philosophy. Not just philosophy, কাৰণ আগৰ সময়ত মই এইটো কথালে আকৌ ঘূৰি আহিম philosophy আৰু science বুলি বেলেগ একো ডিভিজন নাছিল এটা সময়ত science-ক natural philosophy বুলি কোৱা গৈছিল এটো কাৰণে Socrates গ্ৰীক thinker তেখেতক এবাৰ গ্ৰীচৰ এগৰাকী এষ্ট্ৰলজাৰ টাইপৰ আছিল তেখেতৰ নাম আছে Oracle of Delphi তেখেতে এবাৰ সক্ৰেটিছৰ ফ্ৰেন্ড এজনক ক'লে যে গোটেই বিশ্বৰ গোটেই ব্ৰহ্মাণ্ডৰ সকলোতকৈ জ্ঞানী লোকজনে হল সক্ৰেটিছ আৰু সেই ফ্ৰেন্ডজনে গৈ সক্ৰেটিছক ক'লে কিন্তু সক্ৰেটিছে বিশ্বাসে নকৰিল সক্ৰেটিছে মানিবলৈ ৰাজিয়ে নাছিলে তেওঁ ৰেডি নাছিলে যে তেখেতেই সবাতোকৈ জ্ঞানী বুলি হেতু কাৰণে তেখেতে কি কৰিলে তেখেতে বিচাৰি উলাল সবলে মানে বেলেগ বেলেগ জেগালৈ বিচাৰি গল যে মুতকৈ জ্ঞানী কোনা মানুহ আছে নি বিচাৰি চাওচোন তেওঁ সকলোকে গৈ প্ৰশ্ন সুধিলে আৰু এটা প্ৰশ্ন সুধিলে যে হোৱাট ইজ দ্য নেচাৰ অফ ৰিয়ালিটি মানে আসল সত্য কি হেতু জানিবলৈ চেষ্টা কৰিলে আৰু সকলোৱে তেওঁ কিবা না কিবা এটা জনাৰ নিচিনাকে মোৰ সায়েন্সৰ টিচাৰ জনে যে কৈ দিলে ঘপকে দিস ইজ ইন্টেন্সিটি এটোৱে হয় আৰু মোক ভালকে বুজাবলৈ নগল তেনেকে সকলোৱে কিবা না কিবা এটা উত্তৰ দিলে কিন্তু ভালকে বুজাবলৈ কোনেও নোৱাৰিল আৰু লাষ্টত তেওঁ ভাবিলে যে হয়তো হসাকে মই সকলোকৈ জ্ঞানী কাৰণ I am humble enough to accept my ignorance and to accept with all modesty that I do not know what is the nature of reality. But the other people around me are not ready. They just pretend to know everything. আৰু হেতু কাৰণে মই ভাবো যে that is a defining moment in western philosophy কাৰণ গোটেই western philosophy western thought বা science যিদৰে কৰা যায় হলমাৰ্কে হল হিউমিলিটি এজন সাইন্টিষ্টে কেতিয়াও কৈ নুফুৰে যে মই ইমান জানো মই এটো ফিল্ডত এক্সপাৰ্ট ন তেখেতে বাস সাইন্স কৰে আৰু I mean asking me just to speak in English. Okay, so I'll continue only in English from and if you have any doubts, the Assamese speakers, please, contact me later. I will share my email ID with you. If you have any questions, you can get back to me later. Yeah, we can have a discussion online. So what's I think the hallmark of Western thinking is its humility. The fact that the scientists like Socrates are ready to accept their ignorance. But what we see today around us is that science has become just a tag. And that tag is like the L'Oreal look or the L'Oreal brand. Just like Aishwarya Rai represents the L'Oreal brand, let's say a BSc or MSc in physics or chemistry or a PhD in biology just represents this brand called science. But I'm not interested in that. I am interested in what science really is beyond the name. আৰু এটা কথা ক'বলৈ বিচাৰো আজিকালি আমি দেখিবলৈ পাওঁ যে সকলোৱে we get to see these days that a lot of people get inspired by, let's say, Aishwarya Rai or Shah Rukh Khan, who does this tag or watch advertisement, or Amitabh Bachchan, who does a Reed and Taylor suits advertisement. They think that wearing those suits will also give them the personality of the celebrity. But what they forget is there is an essence beyond just these brands, beyond just these tags. And we should not reduce a certain idea, a certain field to just imitation of others. Is being ambassadored or represented by Amitabh Bachchan because he is prior to the brand. That means his personality is more important than the brand. That's why we are attracted to the brand, right? So instead of that, we should try to develop ourselves or mold ourselves into a great personality and then maybe have our own brand. No matter what we wear, that itself will become very important because people will start taking it seriously. But now moving on to the next slide, please. Can we have the next slide? So this division, between so-called science and non-science, it was articulated in the most extreme way by this philosopher that you see on the left of your screen. This is Karl Popper, the greatest, arguably the greatest British philosopher of science of the last century. So he had this theory of what is science and what is pseudoscience, what is non-science. So he said that science is definable, or science can be defined as anything that can be falsified. So prior to the discovery of the continent of Australia, people only saw whites. And after the and until then, so all scientists came to a conclusion that all swans are white. So that was a fact, a scientific fact. But after Australia was discovered, they saw that there are also black swans, and that kind of falsified that entire hypothesis. But the very fact that the hypothesis could be falsified makes it scientific, because according to Karl Popper, the pseudoscience or things like astrology or psychoanalysis, Freudian psychoanalysis, they are never falsifiable because they claim to explain everything under the sun. Also, let's say, for example, religion says that the angel has white wings, let's say. This is but we can neither prove it or disprove it because we cannot measure quantitatively any angel's wings. We have never seen an angel, and as an angel might never appear. So Karl Popper defines science as only that those disciplines which have statements that can be falsified. That was very interesting because that was actually not the best and the clearest picture of science, because over the centuries, before 200 years, there was hardly any difference between science and humanities. Please. please. To take us to the next slide. Am I audible? Oh, yeah, thank you. Okay, so this picture is of Humphrey Davy, the great chemist who lived more than 200 years ago. And this is a page from his one of his note. Poet, you know, he invented a Davy's lamp. He is known as the father of electrolysis. He was one of the first chemists to separate elements, you know, using the electrolytic method. And on his notebooks, we see the poems written all over. So this poem is called On Breathing the Nitrous Oxide. So he felt a sense of euphoria or happiness, and that's why he called it the laughing gas. You know, nitrous oxide, we know, is called the laughing gas, right? So you see how poetry and science were kind of married together without clear distinguishability in the time of Humphrey Davy. But that kind of counters what Popper says. So for Popper, there is a clear division between what is science and what is pseudoscience, right? But for Humphrey Davy, that is not the case. And also not just Humphrey Davy. Can we go to the next slide, please? Next slide, please. Yes. So here is another interesting person. He is August Kekule. Kekule was a German organic chemist at that time. I mean, again, all of these were called natural philosophers or men of science. The word scientist was coined much later, and that was interestingly used for a woman. And I will come to it later. So Kekule was the one who kind of discovered the structure of benzene. But how he came across it is very interesting. And I would also like to share an anecdote that Kekule was born in the city of Darmstadt, the same city where I was a research fellow in Germany. So I kind of live very close to Kekule's ancestral home. But Kekule once was not able to, all scientists across the world were busy, you know, they wanted to find out what's the structure of benzene. It seemed quite complicated. And one day Kekule suddenly saw this dream. He daydreamed about a snake coiling on itself. So it kind of gobbled its own tail, and it formed a circular pattern. And based on that dream, he kind of imagined the circular chemical structure of benzene, and that turned out to be true. So again, dream, magic, superstition, and poetry all come together in the practice of science. But the true scientist is never really bothered about what he's doing is science or pseudoscience. In fact, that challenges these clear distinctions between what is science and what is humanities. Can I go to the next slide? I want to give you a few more examples of people who straddle both the worlds. Yes. So now we have two very interesting people. One is on the left is Sir Isaac Newton, and on the right is Leibniz. So you know, Newton was an astronomer, a physicist. He was also the president of the Royal Mint, which minted coins. He was a theologian. He was, in a way, at that time, a natural philosopher. But Leibniz was a polymath. He was not only a philosopher, he was a diplomat. He was a mathematician. He was a physicist. He was an author. So what is interesting about Leibniz is, I mean, he was a relativist. So relative means he thought everything in the world was relative. There were no absolute values. On the other hand, Newton saw everything. He was a believer, by the way. So Newton believed in God. So he thought that God had made one universe. So God had planned everything, and everything in the universe worked according to God's plan. And that was the foundation of his theory of gravity, which he later propounded, and also many other theories of how the heavenly bodies, how the sun and the moon, they function. But we know Einstein came a couple of centuries later, a few hundred years later, and challenged those and kind of extended Leibniz's. He was not really a believer, he was not a theist, but he was a pantheist. So for him, the universe itself was God. God was not someone seated beyond the universe. And yes. So now the debate between Leibniz and Newton is very important, because Leibniz at the time was not as famous as Newton, but he is also credited with inventing calculus independently of Newton. So although Newton was at the time famous as the inventor of calculus, but the method that we're using today was invented independently by Leibniz. Both, I mean, the idea of there being infinitesimal numbers and how to calculate those, that was completely invented by Leibniz. Also, there were many other debates between both Leibniz and Newton, but why Leibniz is important, because he was a great philosopher. He invented, according to Leibniz, were the basic components of reality. So just like atoms, monads, there were many monads, infinitely many monads, which taken together form what we call reality, both concepts and the physical world. Can you go to the next slide, please? Yes. So a few other examples. So on the left, you see René Descartes, the great French mathematician and philosopher, who actually is famous, who invented the Cartesian system in mathematics. But in philosophy, he is even more important, because he gave the first statement of the Enlightenment in Europe, which is, I think, therefore I am. So the idea of a thinking being, was first introduced in philosophy by Descartes. So he is an example of someone who is both a philosopher and a mathematician of equal rank. Symbol, the ultimate epitome of the amalgamation between science, engineering, and the arts. So Leonardo da Vinci, we know, is famous for having painted the Mona Lisa, but he was equally famous as an architect, as someone who, as an imagineer, he imagined objects which we use today. For example, the helicopter. He was also an anatomist. He drew the first accurate diagrams of the human anatomy, the human body, and so on. Can you go to the next slide? So with these examples, I'm just
unmute yourself, please.
audible now.
Yes.
Okay. So this slide again is very interesting. So through these examples, I'm just trying to show you how science and humanities before 1800, how they were both same. For example, Galileo, who is known as the world's first person or first academic to use the scientific method, when he was appointed as the professor of mathematics at the University of Pisa, he was very disappointed. He said, no, I want to be called not the professor of mathematics, but the professor of natural philosophy. So that tells you that physics at that point of time was known as natural philosophy. In fact, it was much later the idea of scientist as being independent of the came up, and that was used for the lady on the right of your screen. Her name is Mary Somerville. She was a brilliant scientist of her time, and she was also a politician, a political activist, and so on. And in an essay that described her, some scholar was trying to find out an equivalent of the word artist in the sciences. So he wanted to find out what could be the equivalent of the term artist to describe someone who was doing the non-arts, or something was quite distinct, like dealing with chemistry or dealing with chemicals, or dealing with natural phenomena. And that's when they came up with the term scientist. And this also tells you a different story also. So today, when you talk about science, there's this thing, in our society, that girls should do arts and boys should do science, usually. and girls should do the soft things and boys should do the hard things like engineering, right? But this example is contrary to that, because the first scientist in the world was a lady named Mary Somerville. So I would request you to do some more search on her online. But yes, this is a very interesting aspect. But this happened roughly 200 years ago. This juncture, this separation, or this division between the science and the humanities. And that's when people started, talking about the arts and the two cultures and so on. Can you go to the next slide? Yes, but towards, let's say, the 1920s, 1930s, and by the time we reached 1940s, this gap had again come to be bridged to some extent, and we are still living in that phase. So the person you see on the left of your screen is the great mathematician, philosopher, and author Bertrand Russell. He was also an activist, a politician, and he belonged to the British aristocracy, a very brilliant person. And he won the Nobel Prize for, I think it was for literature. And it was, or for peace, I'm not really sure, but he wrote a famous book called The History of Western Philosophy. And why Russell is famous is because he came up with this idea of the barber's paradox. So let me explain it to you using set theory. So imagine, I'm sure some of you in the audience might be familiar with set theory. So imagine there is a set of all the sets which are not elements of themselves. So people who are not technically sound, they can ignore it for the next 2 minutes. I'll come back to you with a more theoretical example. So a set of sets which are not members of themselves, which are not elements of themselves, he asked us to imagine. But then he came up with a paradox, that such sets might exist as well as they do not exist. So that kind of exposed certain inherent contradictions or incompleteness within the naive set theory that was used at that point of time. And set theory, is today considered by many to be the foundation of mathematics. So imagine in layman terms, there is a barber in a village, and a village has only one barber, right? One fine morning, the barber comes up and he declares that I will shave all those men in the village who don't shave themselves. Okay? I'm repeating, the barber says that I will shave all those men in the village who don't shave themselves. The question emerges, who will shave the barber? Because there's only one barber in the village, right? So if the barber shaves himself, he cannot shave himself because he said that he will shave only those who don't shave themselves, right? That's the contradiction to explain. I mean, so mathematically speaking, that's what Bertrand Russell did. And that kind of showed certain limitations of set theory, which were the foundation of mathematics at that time. And right after Russell, there was another famous, a great logician, mathematician, philosopher, again a polymath. His name was Kurt Gödel. He was an Austrian scholar, and he came up with the incompleteness theorems 1 and 2. So according to him, to speak in layman's terms, a formal system based, a formal axiomatic system is incomplete in that there will always be one statement within that system which cannot be proven within the system. So to just explain it in layman's terms, so I just told you about the barber's paradox, right? So the barber in a village can neither shave himself nor not shave himself. But this problem is solved if we think about the existence of, or if we assume the existence of another village with another barber. So that barber can definitely shave this barber because the laws of this village apply to this village alone, right? So that barber can shave, but that means we are bringing in another system. So if we view the entire village as one system, that means we are borrowing another system from elsewhere to explain phenomena in that village, right? That's exactly what Gödel was saying, that if we have a full system of logic like physics, let's say physics is, or English grammar is a system of laws and rules, right? So no such system can be complete, because to explain the phenomena or the statements in that system, you always need a second system. And to explain that second system, you need a third system. And to explain that third system, you need a fourth system, and so on. That means there is an external context within which contains every axiomatic system. And that's where the humanities come in. Because I think the humanities provide a context in which scientific phenomena unfold. So scientific phenomena are not independent. Scientific phenomena are not, existing in vacuum. They exist always in an external or embedded within an external environment, an external setting. And that, to explain that setting, to understand that setting properly, we need the humanities. In fact, the humanities are indispensable. So can you move on to the next slide, please? Can you move to the next slide? Yes. So here's another very interesting polymath. He was an engineer. He started off as an engineer, then became a mathematician. No, can we go back to the previous slide? Yes, so this is Ludwig Wittgenstein, arguably the greatest philosopher of the 20th century. He was a logician, a mathematician, an engineer, a philosopher, an author, and I mean, he was also an English teacher at a primary school for some time. So why Wittgenstein is important is because he kind of, very similar to Popper, he also saw a clear division between arts or philosophy and natural philosophy. So he said that the arts or the humanities or philosophy or the soft sciences or the liberal arts are like poetry. So for example, I can philosophize. Let's say I'm a philosopher and I'm imagining things like, and I make a bold statement that all human beings in the world deserve freedom. Okay, or like the Marxists say, workers of the world unite, right? But the fact is, we can never ever call this statement scientific, because what unity is, whether they are united or not, that cannot be measured in quantitative terms or mathematically. That cannot be falsified. And since this statement cannot be falsified, it is a non-science or a pseudo-scientific statement, right? So Wittgenstein, he said that such statements may be pseudo-scientific, but at the same time, they are like poetry. So just like when I sing a song, it makes no difference, or I recite a poem, it makes no difference to the one who is listening. It's just like a form of entertainment, or it makes no change in the physical world. Philosophical statements or poetic statements, they don't make any change in a natural world. So science is an independent entity, which has a force of its own, which determines the reality, the physical reality that we live in. And philosophy just comments on science. It's metaphysics. So it just speaks for the background, but can make no real difference. So that was what Wittgenstein wrote in Tractatus Philosophico-Logicus, which he published at the age of 17. It's an amazing book and one of the greatest books of philosophy written in the last many hundred years. So can you go to the next slide, please? So that is, this way of thinking, which resembles Popper, Karl Popper, who talked about science and pseudoscience, Wittgenstein, who talked about the humanities as just a poetry. And can you go to the next slide, please? The next slide. Yes. So this is again Quine. Quine was also one of the greatest analytic philosophers of the 20th century. So he's similar to both Popper and Wittgenstein. He also considered philosophy to be just a handmaiden of science. Handmaiden means philosophy can observe the happenings, the incidents that scientists are doing, their inventions, the discoveries from the boundary. But philosophy or the arts cannot make any real change in the real world. That means they are dispensable or disposable. We do not need philosophy for making real changes in the world, but it is science or the scientists who are controlling the world, who are doing the adventurous, the amazing, the wonderful things. But the philosophers, all they can do is they can adopt those scientific methods into their own discipline, like the Marxists do. Often, Marxists call them, Marxism claims to be a science. It doesn't claim to be an art. Marxism is a way of life, is an entire perspective. It claims to be a science. But I mean, they kind of follow Quine, and they have adopted the scientific way of viewing things from the sciences into the humanities, into politics and so on. But they will still never play the central role. The central role, the main adventurers, the main actors of world history are the scientists. That's a view. Again, we started with Popper. There were, I give you the example of different people who countered these claims, like of Popper, Wittgenstein, or Quine. They, for example, Humphrey Davy, or Kekule, or Leibniz, or Descartes, all of them, or Bertrand Russell, they straddled both the worlds. They were scientists, artists at the same time. But Quine, Popper, and Wittgenstein will not agree with this. They say that there is a strict division between both the sciences and the humanities. Can you go to the next slide? Can you go to the next slide, please? Okay. So here, there are three contemporary celebrity thinkers, scientists, and scholars. One of them is Richard Dawkins, to your extreme left. Then in the middle, it is Steven Pinker. So Richard Dawkins is an evolutionary biologist from England. Steven Pinker is an American cognitive psychologist, a neuroscientist. And we have Noam Chomsky, who is more famous as an activist or a socialist thinker, but he's also a linguist, right? So according to them, again, they are very similar to what Wittgenstein or Popper or Quine have said. They think that the role of the humanities at the maximum, the humanities can contribute to the popularization of science. So you can use the arts or the creative arts, like I'm using this PowerPoint to communicate certain things to you. You can make scientific statements more artistic or palatable to the public. You can use the arts or the communication medium or the social media to popularize the sciences, to spread rationalist thinking among the people. But still, the humanities are dispensable. That means you can get rid of them and still the world will go along as it does. So the science is what exists, or rationality. Rational man exists at the center of everything. So the humanities are indispensable. Can you go to the next slide? Next slide, please. Yes, but these were all mainly analytic thinkers. If you go to the continental philosophy, so there was a famous, and now I'm coming to, now I'll begin my argument about why I think that that humanities are not dispensable. You can never get rid of them. In fact, humanities are as important as science, if not more. And that's the crux of my argument. I do not think, and I will never agree to anyone who says that science plays the central role and humanities can only play an assistive and an auxiliary role to science. No, humanities can play the central role. And the best example of this is the field of hermeneutics. So what is hermeneutics? How many of you have heard about hermeneutics? Can you raise your hand in the chat box? Can you come in? Can you say yes if anyone has heard of the term hermeneutics? Okay, great. So hermeneutics, I have at least a few people who have heard hermeneutics. Hermeneutics is the science or the art of interpreting texts, right? Or interpreting phenomena, okay? For example, when you read, let's say, a novel, right? A novel has certain the words, for example, the word murder. If the word murder comes or appears in a novel, whose murder? What kind of murder? Murder by whom? Murder where? These are the questions which set the context, and it is only in that context that you can interpret the word murder, right? That means to understand every element, every word, every letter of the novel, you need a context. That means, and the context is what? The larger novel, the entire novel itself, right? So that is called hermeneutics. But there is also something called a hermeneutic circle, which means, and which is interesting, which is like a paradox. You need the elements of the novel to interpret the novel, but again, you also you need the novel, the larger context, the background to interpret each element or each unit of that novel. But again, you need each unit to interpret the larger novel. So the question is, which came first? It's like the chicken and egg situation. Whether it was the egg which came first or the chicken, we don't know, right? Similarly, we don't know, but at the same time, we need hermeneutics to interpret text. So for example, when Humphrey Davy, in one of the previous slides that I showed, he talked about the laughing gas and nitrous oxide. The gas was not something that emerged out of nowhere. To understand the test tube, the elements that he put into the test tube, how he conducted electrolysis, the vapors that emerged from the test tube, you need hermeneutics to interpret that phenomenon. And that's where humanities or philosophy in particular is very important. Without a philosophical way of thinking, you can never understand that. And in the same slide, okay, by the way, the person on the left of the slide is the most famous practitioner of hermeneutics. Is the great German philosopher Martin Heidegger. I'm sure many of you have heard of Martin Heidegger. He's kind of infamous because he happened to be a member of the Nazi party, and he was the most brilliant philosopher of his time. He kind of popularized the idea of hermeneutics, and one of his intellectual disciples was Hubert Dreyfus, an American professor who applied the term hermeneutics to understand the limitations of artificial intelligence. Everyone is talking about data science, artificial intelligence, robotics, and so on, cloud computing. But Hubert Dreyfus said that we human beings are scared, right? That once computers, like in the Terminator film, I'm sure many of you have seen it, like machines become conscious and they start controlling human beings, even artificial consciousness, the neural networks, and they can start functioning like the human brain. And one day they will overtake us and they will rule us or eliminate us. That's even Stephen Hawking has expressed fears about it. So has Elon Musk. But Hubert Dreyfus, he kind of said that no, artificial intelligence will never be able to completely overtake human beings because human beings exist in a context. They are embedded in a social. Human beings refer to so many things and they make sense of every unit object, not as existing in vacuum, but as embedded in a larger network of the world, right? So everything exists as part of a network. So it is impossible for a machine to understand that context, which could be infinite, right? So human beings always are able to use or their brains or use to make sense or to find a way in an unknown city. Let's say when you go to Delhi, you go to Delhi for the first time, right? And you don't know anything. You have come to a city. You have directly gone from North Lakhimpur, which is a small town, to Delhi. You don't speak Hindi, but somehow you will be able to find your way across the street or navigate your way through the city. Why? Because you're using your intelligence to make sense of the roads, the locations, everything using multiple reference points, which is never possible for a machine. A machine cannot in any way try to or be able to form connections the way the human mind does. And that is the reason why artificial intelligence can never overtake us. And today, in fact, this Heideggerian thinking, this hermeneutic thinking has been borrowed by the latest generation of computer scientists and data scientists and artificial intelligence experts who are now changing the way they develop computer algorithms. So now we know about this thing called machine learning, right? So what you do is you just put in certain information, certain data, very minute data into a system, into an algorithm, and let the machine decide on its own. Let the machine do the thinking. So that's called machine learning. So the machine learns based on very simple data. So you cannot bring in all data and feed it into the machine and expect the machine to become conscious and start functioning. No, the machine has to learn on its own using all the reference points. And that is one of the main uses of philosophy in the sciences, and which is possible only because of philosophy. Can you go to the next slide, please? Can you go to the next slide, please? Okay. So again, this hermeneutic thinking is applicable in the analysis of text. Like I told you, the best example of it is Chinua Achebe's criticism of Joseph Conrad. So how many of you know Chinua Achebe or Joseph Conrad? Can you say yes in the chat box? Joseph Conrad, we know, you know, okay, of course. So Joseph Conrad was a great author. He wrote in multiple languages. He was of Belgian origin, if I'm not wrong, but he wrote greatly in English. And Heart of Darkness is one of his greatest novels, right? So in the Heart of Darkness, he uses the word, the N word, right? N means he uses, I should not be using it, but which is banned today, but the word nigger or negro, which is absolutely wrong and improper to use in this setting, but he uses it many times within quotes, you know, showing as if it is the characters of the novel who are using that word and not him. But Chinua Achebe says that after many decades, Chinua Achebe criticized, Chinua Achebe also was the first or the second African Nobel laureate. He was a great literature. He wrote a famous book called Things Fall Apart. And Chinua Achebe critiqued or criticized Joseph Conrad as being a hardcore racist. Why? Because taking the, or hiding behind the characters, Joseph Conrad was accused of using racist slurs himself. So when he used nigger or negro, it was Joseph Conrad who was kind of exploding out with his racist tendencies. But that interpretation or that critique of Joseph Conrad's novel would not be possible if instead of Chinua Achebe, it is a computer who is reading or analyzing the novel, because the computer doesn't know the historical circumstances within which Joseph Conrad was writing. The computer doesn't know about the improperness of the word nigger or negro, and what exactly was the social context in which this novel was unfolding. So to interpret these minute details of text of any document, you need the human mind, and that's where the humanities come in. Again, I repeat, humanities will exist, and this is a central argument I'm trying to make. Humanities will exist as long as the human mind exists. And what I'm trying to say is the human mind will never cease to exist, because the computers or any machine can never take over the human mind. So as long there is a human mind, be it a scientist, be it an artist, be it a philosopher, be it a chemist, you will need the humanities, because there is the interpretative or the hermeneutic aspect of it. And that can never be done purely within the domains of science. You need a context, and that context is provided by, you know, by the larger circumstances. Now, can you go to the next slide? So another very important aspect of humanities, a use of humanities, which scientists use every day but they don't acknowledge, is that the humanities expose or highlight the difference between correlation and causation. So let me explain it to you. For I think many of you will not be familiar with this distinction or understand what's correlation, what's causation. So what is correlation? So let's say I sneeze, right? Like achoo, okay? And there is immediately at the same time simultaneously an earthquake in my town. Let's say there's an earthquake, right? I'm sitting in Lakhimpur right now. So can you just say that just because both these events happen together that my sneeze caused the earthquake? No, they are correlated because they happen simultaneously. Now let's say I sneeze again, okay? I sneeze again and there's again an earthquake. Then we think that, okay, maybe, I mean, twice it has happened, that means he must have caused, but we still do not have any evidence to prove that my sneeze has caused the earthquake. It is only correlated with each other. Similarly, like I have shown on the left of your screen, when you turn a switch on and the bulb burns, you know, and the light appears out of the bulb, we can no way prove that the turning on of the switch or the completing of the circuit has caused the burning of the bulb or the lighting of the bulb. Both are correlated. Even if they happen, let's say 1,000 times or billion or trillion times, still there is no way in which we can expose the causation or prove any causation between the pressing of the switch and burning of the bulb, right? That is still a correlation, and that was first. This was shown by a philosopher called David Hume. So David Hume was a Scottish philosopher, one of the most brilliant minds of his time, part of the Scottish Enlightenment. And David Hume said that the sun may not rise tomorrow. What he meant to say is that only because the sun has risen every day from the east in the last thousands or millions of years, how can we prove that the sun is also going to rise tomorrow? Because we still think that that it is, we think that it is a causation, but actually it is still just a correlation. And so when a scientist sees, let's say he puts puts one chemical into the other, and let's say the chemical turns pink, right? So can he just assume that this chemical has what caused the other chemical to turn pink? No, it has not caused, but they are correlated, right? So there can be different degrees of correlation. Let's say it happens 10 times, then the degree of correlation is more than it having happened one time, but it is still correlation. So to go into, and that this explanation, when we are able to have a clarity of understanding of our own experiments, of the own natural phenomena, that is very much essential for a scientist or for the sciences. And that is provided only by the humanities or a philosophical way of thinking. Purely quantitative or scientific thinking can never ever establish whether something is causation or correlation. To understand it in minute detail, to get a larger picture or a better picture of truth, what is satya, what is truth, what is hosa kotha, that actual thing, you need the humanities to explain it in detail. Can you go to the next slide, please? Can you go to the next slide? Yes. So finally, I know it's been a long presentation, but we are coming to the end of it. So finally, the person you see, this is the third practical use of science. So I've been trying to prove that science is central to our human condition. Science is absolutely essential. It is not dispensable or disposable. I'm so sorry. The humanities are absolutely essential, and not just science. And humanities are essential in very practical ways. Unfortunately, what we see in today's universities, in today's schools, is that humanities have been reduced to just flowery language, complicated postmodern terms, or just activism. What we fail to see, or in our professors, or in the students, or in the classroom, is exposition or exploration of these practical uses of the humanities. And I urge all of you, I'm sure that many of you in this seminar, attending this webinar, will be professors or teachers of the humanities or students of the humanities. I request you to not think of yourself as just handmaidens or assistants of scientists, or that humanities is something very easy. You need to just read a poem or draw a picture, or say very amazing things, make a good presentation. No, humanities has practical, real uses in our everyday life, which are essential for our existence. So I have shown you one, hermeneutics. The next was correlation, causation, true interpretation of scientific phenomena. The third one I want to tell you about is how humanities can give a direction or meaning to our life. And this is, I think, the most important aspect of the humanities. So the person you see, can anyone tell who is this person in the center of the screen? Can anyone tell you? Tell me, please. In the chat box. Who is this person? Anyone? He was a Nobel laureate in literature, by the way, friend. Yes, great. So this is Mr. Monjil Soikia has just said, this is Albert Camus, a great French absurdist, or some call him existentialist as well, a philosopher who was famous for many things. I mean, but his most famous philosophy is, or philosophical work, is The Myth of Sisyphus, and his most famous novel is The Stranger. So in this novel, there is a very interesting statement, you know, should I kill myself or have a cup of coffee? So when you read it, it might sound quite absurd, just like his philosophy is, but let me explain what he meant exactly by this statement. So for this, we need to go to his philosophical work, The Myth of Sisyphus, right? So Sisyphus was a Greek legendary character who was cursed by the gods to continuously, can you go to the next slide, please? Next slide, please. Yes, so this is Sisyphus. That is Sisyphus. So Sisyphus was cursed by the gods to continuously carry a huge boulder, a stone on his back, take it up to the top of the hill, and from there it falls down, and he has to go back again and carry it again upwards, and then it falls down again, and this happens an infinite number of times. So that was his punishment by the gods for some sin he had committed, right? So that seems like a very boring and absolutely cruel punishment, right? So your entire life has nothing but just the taking of a stone or a huge boulder on your back, carrying it to the top of the mountain, it falls back, and you pick it up and take it back. So Albert Camus raised a very interesting question. He said, why does Sisyphus not commit suicide? Just think about it. Why do you think this man has a choice, right? I mean, his life is just mundane, monotonous. He knows that this is the destiny. His destiny is to come back down and again carry the stone up, and the stone will again fall down, right? So I think, so tell me, why do you think he has not committed suicide? Because Camus thought that each one of us is like Sisyphus. Our lives are becoming increasingly mechanical. We are living through the same mundane routine every day, and we know that one day we are all going to die. So just like the destiny of the stone is to fall down, our destiny is to die, right? We all know, but why are we still alive? Why are we still not committing suicide? And for that, we go back to the previous slide. Can you go back to the previous slide? Previous slide, please. So Camus, like he says, should I kill myself? So that means, should we kill ourselves, or should we have a cup of coffee? That's the dichotomy or the dilemma that Camus brings forward. And I would choose to have a cup of coffee. Camus was French, so the French love drinking coffee. So today we can say, আমি নিজকে মাৰি পেলাও নে অলপ কোবাৰ পৰা গৈ হাঁহ মাংস অলপ খাওঁ কোবাৰ, বা should we have some paneer or some, you know, some pulao or biryani from somewhere, you know, because anyways, now we are under lockdown, right? So there's not much happening. We are repeating the same schedule every day. So the question is, why don't we kill ourselves? Because we are not going to kill ourselves, because in that moment, okay, if we live life as just an accumulation of small, minute, infinitesimally small moments, then it is worth living every moment. Because in that moment, I can do two things. Either I can be like Sushant Singh Rajput, bring a rope from somewhere, hang myself, or pop a few sleeping pills and kill myself, frustrated with the world, unhappy with the way things are, and, you know, knowing that my life is not going anywhere. Or I can think that, okay, at this moment I can go buy a rope and hang myself, but I can also use that same moment to make myself a nice glass of wine, or have a cup of coffee, or make some Maggie, go to my kitchen and make a Maggie. Because if we think about the larger picture, if we think of too far, then life is indeed meaningless. But if we look at life as comprising of small moments, then each of these moments is really worth living, is infinitely valuable. And that's precisely what Camus has told us. So can you go to the next slide? And this is the philosopher telling us the purpose of life. So a scientist would, can you go to the next slide, please? Next slide. So scientists would not have been able to give us such a clear picture. Yes. So we know, I mean, our news channels, our Facebook feeds, and all our social media over the last many weeks has been filled with information and laments about the untimely and tragic deaths, the suicide of Sushant Singh Rajput, right? But uh, I mean, look at this Dil Bechara. It was his last movie, and when we now see him, you know, we kind of realize what we have lost. Just we all of us think that, oh my God, if this guy would have lived for a few more days, we would have seen more of his acting skills, more of his talent. But sadly, he is no more. That is why his last movie, this, has managed to get record views on YouTube, right, and likes on Facebook. Why? Because we know that he's not going to come back. This is the last moment of his life, right? That only when things don't exist or things are in shortage, when life becomes just, it gets reduced in duration to that last moment, only then does the real value of life emerge. So I'm sure that none of you would agree, none of you would have expected or wanted him, such a talented person, to commit suicide. But now that he has, we realize the mistake, the grave mistake he made, the talent that he had. Similarly, it also applies to us. When we look at, let's say now, Irfan Khan, the other day he passed away. And suddenly, Irfan Khan never got much media attention. It was mainly main film stars like Shah Rukh Khan or Salman Khan who were getting all the attention. But now that he's no more, we are repeatedly watching English medium, right? We are realizing how important he is, how great, how valuable his life was. Because he's no more, we are living and reliving that every moment we see him on the screen. And that's TV, right after the death of Irfan Khan, he said that, today you're talking so much about Irfan Khan, but uh, 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 where was all this attention? He was alive. Similarly, when Bhupen Hazarika, even towards the last 20 years or 10 years of his life, Bhupen Hazarika never received much media attention. Only after he passed away was so much, suddenly people started naming everything, all schools or institutions as Hudha Kontho, or named him after Bhupen Hazarika. But when he was alive, I don't think he got the due attention over the last during the last 20 or 15 years of his life, right? So that means the value of human life emerges only when it exists no more, or it exists just on the brink. And that's what Albert Camus was trying to tell us. So I think that is what more can the humanities offer. That's the most practical solution. Why should we live our lives? And this no scientist can explain. The scientist can tell you how to live a life. The scientist can tell you how you can prevent your body from having diabetes, or how you can keep yourself healthy, how you cannot get electrocuted by turning on a switch, all of that, how you can keep yourself safe, how to drive a car, or obeying all the laws of physics. But a science, and that explanation is given only by a humanist or a philosopher, right? Can you go to the next slide? Next slide. So finally, I think what I'm sure you have come to realize that by now I have already told you that there is no real distinction between the humanities and the sciences. And even if there is, let's say there is, it is only complementary. They complement each other and they need each other for their respective humanities, and the humanities need the sciences. Why? Because we are, after all, human beings. The world exists only because I am, or you exist, or I exist. Because the mind exists, because we as human beings exist, right? And what is the defining feature of a human being, of a human mind, is that it reasons.
Dear participant, kindly.
Hello, is he there or is he disconnected?
Is Aloy still online? Mr. Aloy? Hello?
Yes. Yes. Hello.
Yeah, abruptly his connection got disconnected, and then we will be connecting to him. Please be patient. Just bear with us for a few seconds.
Hello, Aloy? Hello?
Sir, he is joining. So Aloy is joining with us.
Am I audible?
Yes.
Yes, yes.
Sorry for the disruption. I mean, problem with my phone. But the last slide. So what I was telling you was that we are rational beings, right? And that is the defining feature. The ability to reason is the defining feature of our mind. And as long as that reasoning thing, that thinking thing will exist, humanities will be extremely important and indispensable. Okay, and I would like to end with this quote by Friedrich Nietzsche, my favorite philosopher and a philosopher which changed my own mind, my own way of thinking. He said very beautifully, and we cannot put it better, that he who has a why to live for can bear almost anyhow. I repeat, he who has a why to live for can bear almost anyhow. That means all of us who have can live this life and go through any circumstance and live despite all troubles, despite any ups and downs. And the humanities tell us why we should live a life. And that is, I think, the most important trait of or the most important contribution that the humanities can offer to the world that we live in. And can we have the next slide? I think this is the end. So thank you very much. So that was it. It took a long time. I'm sure many of you are tired, but thank you very much for sticking to the session. And I hope we will have such conversations again. I thank the North Lakhimpur Girls College for please note down my email ID. I'll read it out, and I think the organizers can also share it with you later. They can mail it to you. So my email ID is ALOY, that is Aloy, @ IITM, M for Madras, .ac.in. So I repeat, it is Aloy @ IITM.ac.in. So if you have any doubts, if you would like to have a discussion on the content of this presentation, feel free to send me or drop me a mail. I would be more than happy to reply to you. Thank you very much. And I hope that this session has helped you think in new ways about the practical use of the humanities and how we should save it from becoming redundant or becoming meaningless like it has happened over the last many decades in Indian universities in particular. Let's revive the humanities and let's create an amalgamation, a complementary existence, a symbiotic existence of both the humanities and the sciences without any conflict. Thank you.
Over to Bebishan Terang.
Thank you so much, Mr. Aloy. It was such a blessed presentation we all have. We are really amazed at the way you present. While I was listening to your presentation and looking at the way you present, I was counting at the word you use in the presentation, and I could find only 14 words that you wrote by yourself. 14 words, the first page and then the last page. The last page contained only 2 words and the first page contained only 12 words. So we picture. So I would just say that, you know, the blend of science and arts, you have done it very well. You have blended properly. Thank you so much. Now, let us look into some of the questions that we have. And then for this very purpose, I would love to give time to Megdav Sunwal. Megdav, are you there?
Yes, Vivsan. Yes, Vivsan, sir. Hello, Aloy, sir. Am I audible to you?
Yes, yes, you are.
Firstly, I would like to thank you for such an informative and very kind of a lucrative session that you have delivered to us. I'm an assistant professor of Department of Philosophy here at Lakhimpur Girls College, and you will be delighted to know that all of the philosophers that you have quoted as being a part of my I'm from the background of philosophy. So as of now, let's leave that thing. So there are some questions which has erupted in the chat box regarding the session or regarding the topic about the relevance and the significance of humanities in the field of science. So I would like to cite some of the questions which has come up in the chat box. So the first question here, it says, it's from firstly, it's written as, verily a humanoid android machine can't judge between how do you do and how are you, unless it is by default fed with the meaning that both means same. It is an polite expression of asking the other person's state. The android robot takes expression literally first. So what is your say on that?
Yeah, thank you for the question. I'll take up this thing about it's interesting. I mean, how do you do? You know, where so that question might have multiple meanings or multiple ways in which you can interpret it. So, for example, let's say I am I have my bulb is fused. I have to replace it with a new bulb, and so I approach someone with asking for help. I said, can you fix the bulb? And the person asks me, first question he asked me is, how do you do? You know, so how do I know whether that how do you do means how to fix the? I will know because I will have idea of the context, right? Because I will be present at the moment with the person. I will have some experience with human interaction. I might have been a friend of that person for a long time. So I will understand the context and I will immediately understand what it means. But a robot will find it extremely difficult to understand or almost impossible, because he will not be able to tell whether that how do you do means whether to fix the bulb or how I am, whether it's a greeting or it's a technical query, right? For that, you need a philosophical interpretation. Language. And that is why what I would say is that a humanoid will never be able to completely overtake us. But that is possible in a way, because nowadays, there is something called machine learning, right? So machine learning, what it does is it feeds in a very little data initially. It doesn't feed in all data, just some little data. And based on that data, the machine itself is able to rectify its past errors. Let's say the machine asks me, how do you do? Let's say the machine replies to that person. The machine approaches this technician and he asks, how do you do? And the machine doesn't understand, machine doesn't reply appropriately, and he gets a negative response, a negative feedback from the technician. So the machine will next time not repeat the same mistake. So the machine will rectify itself based on its past experience, right? So of course, the machine's brain, the machine's neural networks can also evolve over time by making mistakes and learning and so on. But that will still be at the human pace. I don't think it can overtake humans unless there is so in artificial intelligence there are three kinds of artificial intelligence. One is artificial narrow intelligence, which is what we mostly see around us these days. The other one is artificial general intelligence, which will be almost as powerful as us or maybe more. The ultimate is artificial supreme intelligence, or sorry, super intelligence. What is artificial super intelligence? It means a machine more intelligent than all machines and all human beings on planet that have existed till now over the last millions of years. That means that machine will be extremely, it will be like almost like God. That machine can be very dangerous. And we don't know, at least for the next couple of decades, I don't see such a machine being invented. Then we might be in trouble. We don't know how that machine will think. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you, sir. There is yet another question. The question itself it's asked like, the humanity is not saved in the hands of the science. The science has the greatest negativity as it throws the great killer that is atom bomb for humanity. Can the humanity be freed from fear and death?
I don't think you can blanket characterize the science as evil or good. That's impossible, because as I told you, science doesn't have a direction. It can tell you how to invent the atom bomb. It can invent the atom bomb, but whether or not to use it and when to use it, when not to use it, why to use it, that can be told only by the humanities. I don't think, I suspect there was any philosopher working on the atom bomb project when America was first inventing it or developing it to drop on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. I'm sure if there was a philosopher, if there was a sociologist, he would have warned well in advance the evil impacts that it could have had on human health, on human. I think that all scientific universities or departments should have a philosopher on board, a sociologist or a moral thinker or an ethicist. We need it, and it is happening now in the West. I don't think in India it has happened widely, but it is still happening, so that we can give direction. Now, just to add a bit, someone once said, a great saint or scholar once said, he gave what is the difference between knowledge and wisdom. So knowledge is knowing how to operate a gun or a revolver. Wisdom is knowing when to operate it or when to shoot the gun, right? So that is the clear difference. And the wisdom can only be provided by a philosophical way of thinking. Hope that answers your question.
Thank you, sir. So we have finally come to the end of the Q&A session. Thank you very much, sir. Now I hand over the mic to our lecturer, Bebishan Terang. So please, Bebishan sir.
Thank you, Megha, for taking up this question time. And also thank you, resource person, for answering all the questions. I believe that the people who have asked those questions are satisfied with it. And if for more details, if you wanted to have a one-to-one conversation, he has freely given us a permission to contact him at his email ID. So please do so and take opportunity to have a talk with him. This particular time, since we have not find any questions, just as a there was a saying by an anonymous who says that when there is no question, either they know everything or they know nothing. So I believe that they know everything. That's why question doesn't come.
Sure.
From your presentation, they know everything. That's why there is no question. So thank you so much for your tedious way of presenting. Now, at this particular time, I would like to invite Dr. Bhupen Sutia, IQAC coordinator, to deliver a word of thanks.
Okay, thank you, Baby Santarang, for giving me the chance to say the word of thanks. Hello. First of all, present here today for making this webinar as a great success. Perhaps all of you know that we have been organizing this series of webinars, talks on different topics from different fields. We have invited scholars, experts from different fields, and we are very much overwhelmed with the response. We thank all the responses, all the people who have participated. And today, of course, we have seen participants from all over India, from universities, from colleges, from participants ranging from teachers, assistant professors, students, research scholars. It has been a very good experience. Now, may I extend the thanks on behalf of Lakhimpur Girls College to our today's honorable well-articulated session from his part at a time when we can see the humanities are being neglected all over the world. Funds are being diverted from the humanities to the to science and technologies, and the entire academic ecosystem is in fact in a mode of shifting to science and technology only. And jobs are drying up, funds are being diverted. And in such a situation, it is a rather, it is a kind of alarming for the people who are interested in humanities. And thank you, Aloy, for your advocating. In fact, you have been advocating a better reception of humanities, or rather a better understanding of humanities. Even people who have been we are doing humanities, we are doing social sciences, we have also started digesting the idea that we are doing a kind of second-class studies, secondary kind of studies, we are doing some supporting service to science and technology. We need to get away from that mentality, and we need to reimpose the importance of humanities. And we know that you have already mentioned artificial intelligence will never be perhaps replace the human brain, the human mind. In order to live as a social animal, we will need humanities. And just I have a food for thought here. Although we are living in a world of science and technology, we can still see that religion or the religious doctrines are striving. And perhaps, religion is not exactly humanities, or perhaps it is not a part of our studies, but perhaps it can give us some food for thought that humanities will never be eliminated, or it can never be replaced. Thank you once again, Aloy Buragohain, for your lucid presentation. And I would like to thank all the participants for even bearing with our initial technical hiccups. And it has been, but after waiting for some time, we have got a very, very good talk today. And I'd like to thank our Honorable Principal Sir for being the leader in the business of organizing the webinar series. And we have our technical team, Dr. Midil Buragohain, Dr. Kalidas Brahma, Dr. Paramaratto, Baby Terang, Magdab Sunwal, and most of our faculty members, our Vice Principal Upen Pujari Sir, all are extending their valuable valuable hands in organizing this webinar. I thank you one and all again.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Bye.
Thank you, Bhupen sir. We have heard the word of thanks. We have heard the presentation from. Before we close, I also would just like to give thanks to our LGC team.
I have an information to share. So this is for all the participants. We will share the feedback link to your through mail. We will mail to you the feedback mail link today, perhaps today or tomorrow. But we will again share the link for certificate after a few days. We have been organizing a series of webinars. Therefore, it takes some time for us to prepare the certificate. So please bear with us. It will take at least 1 week. We have not been able to send the certificates for our earlier seminars as well. So please wait for our communication from our end for the certificate. Okay, that's all.
Over to Babishan.
Yes, thank you, sir. Thank you, Parama. And as I said, before we conclude the program, I also would like to give some questions to us to reflect these days during this COVID-19 lockdown. There are 4 questions. Where do you come from? Who are you? Why are you here? Where are you going from here? These are the 4 questions that I have for all the participants out here. As sir has mentioned, the link for the feedback will be sent to your email ID, but certificate will be given after a week or so. So thank you everyone, and then stay tuned with us. Tomorrow also we have webinar. If you have already registered, please kindly attend the program. Thank you, and from my side, I am Baby Santera and signing out from this webinar. Thank you.
Okay, thank you all. So I'm closing the meeting. Thank you, Aloy. Thank you all.
Thank you.